Video game movie adaptations. Oh boy. Yeah, if you're familiar with the crazy road of video game films, chances are you're also familiar with the infamously bad rep. You have your Super Mario Brothers, Dooms, and Tomb Raiders, and while a lot of these films aren't great, I understand why they exist. Money. Exposing your brand to an entire different type of audience not only boosts said brand's recognition, but the attention generated from fans of the pre-existing game is essentially assured revenue. That leads us to Resident Evil. After Capcom realized they had a massive success in their hands in the form of the new survival horror series, Resident Evil, moves to expand the brand were starting to take place, which included developing games on other consoles, striking deals with publishers, and of course greenlighting production on a film adaptation. In 1997, a German production company named Constantin Film bought the rights to make a Resident Evil movie, and screenwriter Alan B. McElroy was tasked with writing the script. The original draft was fairly faithful to the original 1996 game, featuring a SWAT team unknowingly infiltrating a zombie-filled mansion after the decimation of their previous team. The film would have also featured most characters from the game, but things like Umbrella and the STARS team would have either been replaced or not mentioned. All creatures from the game would have made an appearance too. Unfortunately, the script was rejected, which leads us to 1998. George R. Romero, aka the director who single-handedly reanimated the very concept of zombies, directed a commercial for Resident Evil 2. Shinji Mikami, the creator of Resident Evil, revealed to have been a huge fan of Romero and was inspired by his work. So naturally, Romero was picked to direct the film, and his draft was even more faithful than the last, not only featuring the Spencer Mansion from the first game, but also included practically every character from the original title. According to Romero, he wrote several different scripts which were all rejected for various reasons. One, the movie would have had an NC-17 rating, which if unaware is more restricted than an R due to it preventing anyone under 17 to attend a screening even if they are accompanied of an adult. And second, the premise of an adaptation of the first game was viewed to be outdated due to the recently released Resident Evil 2 and 3 taking place in a zombie-infested city. However, the producers did like the script, but regardless, Romero left after the rejections. After Romero came director Jamie Blakes, whose script centered around the STARS team from the game fighting off creatures in Raccoon City, just like the producers wanted. But this script too was denied, and finally that leaves us with the director Paul W.S. Anderson, the director of the successful Mortal Kombat movie adaptation. On a subjective note, I find this video game movie to be one of the better ones, which likely influenced the decision to bring Anderson on board. The movie was originally titled Resident Evil Ground Zero due to it being a prequel of sorts, but the name was changed after 9/11, and on March 12, 2002, Resident Evil hit theaters to very mixed reception. What's up everyone, Sly here, and together we're going to go over the 2002 Resident Evil film. I've had a very weird relationship with this movie, mostly due to the lack thereof. When thinking of Resident Evil films, I either think of the CG films or the sequels to the film we're going over today, but after rewatching it in preparation for this video and examining it more closely, I think I've formed more of an opinion on this film. Without any more stalling, let's talk about Now, one thing I can immensely compliment this film for is its amazing opening. We see an unknown stranger making mysterious preparations before breaking a vial containing an unknown chemical agent, which happens to be airborne. The intelligence system within the facility recognizes this, and after a minute or two of suspenseful build-up, we watch as each of these employees are all massacred. This sequence is easily one of the best in the film, and it's a very chilling note to start the film off. Now is also a good time to comment on how good the theme to this movie is. It's the only track in this film that sounds like Resident Evil. We didn't cut to a half-naked woman because 2000's horror movie, and this character in question happens to be our lead, Alice, played by Mila Jovovich. We see her exploring some random house, seemingly confused when she's abruptly grabbed by a man. It's here when a fucking task force crashes into the mansion and restrain the two. We're then introduced to the leader of the team, James Shade, played by Colin Salmon, and two notable soldiers under his command. First is Rain Ocampo, played by Michelle Rodriguez, who is easily my favorite character in the movie. And second is Chad Kaplan, played by Martin Cruz. Alice's attacker introduces himself as Matt, who's played by Eric Mabius. There's also some notable extras like Rain's friend, JD, the medic, and other commandos. All the actors and actresses do a pretty good job in their selective roles, particularly Michelle, who kills it with her performance. As for the characters, while I won't go into much detail just yet, they're each serviceable for the plot. Matt claims to be a police officer, but the crew don't see him on file and keep him restrained. The task force orders the two to take a cable car underground, and hold on, what the fuck is happening? Yeah, as much as I praise the opening for the movie, I really am not a fan of the way the story actually starts. It's intentional for the audience to be completely bewildered as to what's happening, however, I think it all moves too fast, resulting in it losing the viewer's attention. In the cable car, JD accidentally discovers an unconscious man inside of it who quickly comes to, and much like Alice, is suffering from some type of amnesia. This man is Spence Parks, played by James Purefoy. We didn't see our first flashback, and wow, the editing for these scenes suck. Anyways, they hint at Alice and Spence having a romance. The group continue forward, and the first zombie we see in the film is relegated to an inconsequential jump scare. As minor as this seems, I find it extremely disappointing, especially considering the games always go out of their way to make the first zombie encounter super memorable. Eventually, Alice demands for some goddamn answers, and James finally explains the situation. Alice and Spence are employees of Umbrella, whose job would pretend to be husband and wife in the mansion above the underground facility in order to cover it up. The facility in question is named the Hive, and this team has been sent to investigate it due to the artificial intelligence of the base, the Red Queen, mysteriously slaughtering all the Umbrella staff. I will say right now, I am a huge fan of this premise. While it's not in any way a recreation of the plots to Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, or Code Veronica, it's still very familiar for an RE story, and I like it. It's more in line with RE1 since it's following a group of soldiers investigating an unfamiliar environment, unknowingly approaching their doom. Kaplan unlocks the hall in front of them, and James, the medic, and two others walk in when they're shut inside by the Red Queen. The nefarious means of the hall are revealed. It's a laser hallway. What follows is a tense and very well-directed scene where the poor soldiers trapped inside are picked off one by one.
Got it.
What a fucking awesome scene. Also, the leader being killed off this early is really unsuspecting, and I think it adds a bigger sense of dread. Now our characters are down a medic, two soldiers, and a leader. They're completely on their own. The group comes across the Red Queen, the AI based off the programmer's daughter, who is then disabled.
You're all going to die down here.
This also disables the power, and the group enter a large room where Rain comes in contact with a survivor. Well, survivor in quotations. This is our first real zombie, and it takes a bite out of Rain before being dispatched by her and JD. What I love about this scene are the group's expected confusion regarding the walking corpse in front of them. But that wasn't the only one. Our characters are now surrounded by the undead. These zombies look great. While some of the digital effects are obviously dated, as expected from a 20-year-old movie, they look really good and properly decayed. But it's here where we realize what movie we're watching. Our characters are surrounded by zombies in a seemingly hopeless situation when the rock music kicks in and the shooting starts. This is an action film, folks, under the false pretense of horror. For some context, the games this movie are based off of rely on pure dread and tension to make the player feel uneasy. While that may often feature action elements, they are for the most part horror. Here though, it's an entirely different story. While our characters are in a horrific situation, the directing, editing, and music choice all screams otherwise. I get the game series is no stranger to action, but I feel like this movie just threw away what could have been a really solid, isolated, and eerie horror film. Kaplan works on getting the doors open and is eventually successful.
Got it. See how easy that was?
With JD out of commission, Rain, Kaplan, and Spence all hide in a room while Alice and Matt are split up. It's here, with Alice, that we get our first look at the Cerberuses, who for context, are vicious undead mutts from the games. The Cerberuses look pretty damn good. It's clear they mostly relied on practical effects to bring these vicious mutts to the big screen, and they look great. What isn't great is the scene that follows. Alice runs away and enters a room with 6 fucking Cerberuses. Anyone even remotely familiar with the games would recognize this as a horrifically unsurvivable situation, but due to awful editing and plot armor, Alice just mows through the pack of killer machines, and that's not the worst of it. What a way to bring in one of the most terrifying creatures from the games and make a complete mockery of them. Switching over to Matt, he searches around a bit when he sees a zombie he apparently recognizes. It attacks him, but he is saved by Alice, and it's here where we finally learn who this guy is. Matt is just a regular guy who knew of Umbrella's shadiness and wanted to do something about it. This zombie was his sister, who he had go into the facility to recover any sort of information to take down Umbrella. She apparently had a contact inside the corporation, which hinted at through Alice's flashback was actually her. And Matt has a suspicion that this contact betrayed her. Back to the other three, it turns out our characters are on a time limit because in just 1 hour the doors to the hive was shut as a failsafe contingency. While I would have preferred more build-up of the zombies, to the movie's credit, they do a great job in setting the stakes. Already, our characters have found themselves in a seemingly inescapable situation. Alice and Matt somehow find a way through the massive crowd of zombies outside because reasons. But as a side note, I like how Alice goes from a quiet, bewildered character to someone who takes charge when no one else is willing to. She reactivates the Red Queen and asks for an explanation. The Red Queen informs us that this entire Umbrella base was used for genetic research for military usage, when a recently created virus named the T-Virus was broken and infected everyone in the building. In the games, it's never confirmed whether the virus is airborne or not, but what I will say is the virus being airborne is 10 times more terrifying than requiring a bite for infection. The Red Queen killed all of the Umbrella employees at the beginning of the movie since it's programmed to contain any potential viral outbreak. The reason our characters aren't dead yet is because the virus dissipates from the air after a while, but still leaves its victims in a state of living. Reanimated in a sense.
You must understand. Those who become infected, I can't allow you to leave. Just one bite, one scratch, you become one of them. They are driven by the basest of impulses, the most basic of needs. The need to feed.
Yeah, as you definitely guessed by now, Rain is pretty fucked. Our characters force the Red Queen to help them escape or to turn her off for good, and the AI leads them to a hall. It's here where they're suddenly ambushed by a crowd of zombies. This leads to another asinine action sequence where Alice snaps a zombie's neck between her legs because 2000's horror movie, and the group claw their way over more zombies when the structure they're climbing on breaks. Alice is safe, but Kaplan gets separated and he somehow makes it through all of these zombies while only receiving one bite. He's tempted to kill himself due to the hopelessness of the situation, but he decides against it as the others are forced to leave him. Rain is looking to be on her deathbed, but it's here where Alice conveniently remembers there's an antivirus located somewhere in the facility. Matt questions her on how she knows this, and she reveals she was his sister's contact, and she doesn't know whether she betrayed her or not. The antiviruses aren't here, but something about the case triggers Spence's memory. All of it. In a shocking turn of events, Spence was the one who purposely infected the facility, and before all of this, he had planned on selling both the T-Virus and the antivirus on the black market to load him and Alice up with moolah. This is a pretty good twist. There was slight hints sprinkled throughout the film, and while it's not some mind-blowing revelation, it adds some flavor to what was otherwise a pretty straightforward story. Spence, now having his memory back, pulls a gun on the group and tries to convince Alice to come with him, but she refuses. A zombie then sneaks up on Spence and bites him, prompting him to go get the antivirus himself. He reaches the case when, oh, okay, we're doing this now. Yep, the infamous liquor creature has made an appearance, and I find it to be quite an odd decision to be included in the film. Lore-wise, liquors are the final stage of mutation after being exposed to the T-Virus, so how long did this creature have to mutate? Furthermore, why aren't there others like it? Maybe in this continuity, it was an intentional experiment, but that's never made clear. Also, this is supposed to be set before the events of RE1. I think a hunter would have made for a more appropriate final creature. Back to the liquor, I think the CG is fine for 2002. It's not great, but for the time, it was acceptable. It kills the shit out of Spence, and it's not long before it makes its way to our characters, and the Red Queen offers to let Matt and Alice go if and only if they kill Rain. Kaplan then comes in and shuts off the Red Queen, saving everyone's life. Easily the most underrated character out of the group. Now knowing where the antivirus is, the group makes it onto the cable car right after Alice kills the zombified Spence. You go, girl. The antivirus is administered to both Kaplan and Rain, who looks 5 feet in the grave, but it looks like she's going to come through, and now on their way out of the facility, things look to be on the upswing. That's until Matt is abruptly wounded by the liquor, revealing it to have found its way onto the cable car. And let's just say, after feeding on Spence, it's undergone quite a little growth spurt. It kills Kaplan and makes its way into the cable car. After fighting it off, Alice pins its tongue onto the floor, and as Matt goes to finish it, it turns out Rain's infection was too far into the process, and she has now fully turned. She's killed, and her corpse knocks into the button behind her, opening the door under the liquor, which sends it into a fiery demise. Now out of the hive, Alice and Matt have made it out. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter since the wound the liquor left Matt starts mutating violently. Right before Alice can cure him, Umbrella agents find the two survivors and restrain them both. They rush Matt off for quick experimentation for something called the Nemesis program before Alice is subdued. She wakes up half naked once again because 2000's horror movie, and she wanders out into the isolated streets of Raccoon City. I will argue to this day this stinger is phenomenal. And that was 2002's Resident Evil. Wow, what a film. Where should I even start? I guess I'll start off with the characters. While it's a shame we didn't get a film starring our fan-favorite personalities from the earlier games, this crew isn't bad. Alice starts out bland as a brick, but gradually becomes the bold hero of the group. Kaplan is a pretty quiet but genuine guy. Rain is a blast at all times due to her no-bullshit nature, and especially because of Michelle Rodriguez's great performance. Spence kind of fills that Wesker role of the group, who goes from an innocent, somewhat likable ally to a cold backstabber. And Matt is a nice little red herring who later turns out to be an unlikely hero. Overall, while these characters lack any sort of depth, I find them pretty likable and thought they were a favorable group of characters. And like I said earlier, the performances all around are decent. When it comes to the narrative, it's an alright premise that serves as a nice prequel tie-in to the first game, but it's thankfully not canon as the more crazy sequels will later confirm. While the story respected that of the source material, I feel like there was a few things such as the bizarre liquor mutation and airborne virus that doesn't line up with continuity. When it comes to the creatures, I think the zombies were awesome in terms of both design and intimidation due to their overwhelming nature. The Cerberuses looked cool at the very least, and while the Omega liquor was silly, I can't help but like it. Unfortunately, this isn't a smooth ride. The movie ditches any and all tension it had going for it and opts for fast-paced action at every turn. The editing is sloppy in a lot of places, and if you're not a fan of early 2000s horror cheese, you're not going to have a good time with this. Still, despite its shortcomings, this movie is definitely a guilty pleasure of mine. It's not perfect, and it doesn't succeed in being a love letter to fans of the games, but what it does succeed in is being a fun, mindless zombie action flick sprinkled with tidbits of horror that happens to connect to early Resident Evil lore. When it comes to video game adaptations, I'd say it's up there in my favorites. But how did it do? Well, the movie was a massive success in the box office, meaning a sequel was inevitable. And with a stinger that teases a film set within the overrun Raccoon City with Nemesis essentially confirmed, what could go wrong? Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, then please like, subscribe, and as always, I will see you guys next time. Peace out.